It began with a whisper through the static of the universe, faint, uncertain, as if space itself had inhaled. I remember the night it arrived. The observatory was half lit, machines humming like mechanical heartbeats, and I was staring into the endless dark, searching for patterns where everyone else saw only noise. That's when the anomaly appeared, a flicker, a deviation too subtle for algorithms, too persistent to ignore. I leaned closer to the monitor, coffee long gone cold, and whispered to myself, "That's not random." For years I had studied the cold geometry of the cosmos, stars dying in silence, galaxies colliding in slow, inevitable dances, but nothing prepared me for this. At first, NASA's system logged it as a faint interstellar wanderer. They called it Triatlas, a rock perhaps, another traveler cast out by gravity's indifferent hand. Yet something about it refused to behave. The data shimmered like a code too complex for coincidence. We reconstructed its trajectory, line by line, reversing the clock of the universe. I still remember the moment the pattern snapped into focus, the instant when curiosity became fear. Its path wasn't random. Every gravitational tug, every invisible ripple of dark matter had been accounted for. There was no chaos, no accident. It had been guided, designed. I called my team at 2 in the morning. Their voices were groggy, skeptical. Probably an error, someone said, a miscalculation. But as the simulation stabilized, silence consumed the room. On the screen, a single elegant arc stretched across the stars, leading not into the void, but toward a specific point, a sun nearly identical to our own. 437,820,270 light-years away. Around it orbited a small, pale blue world, nestled perfectly between fire and ice, a world that could cradle life. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned the hum of the computers. For a moment we all believed we had found proof we weren't alone, a relic perhaps from a civilization far older than ours. But then came the realization that hollowed the room of breath. Triatlas wasn't debris. It wasn't an accident. It had been launched. I watched as the lines of code ran across the screen, one equation after another confirming the impossible. The object's velocity fluctuated at precise intervals. Subtle corrections, rhythmic pulses of motion too deliberate for nature. It was steering itself. Like a message written in orbital mechanics, whispering through gravitational symphonies, "I am coming." When I presented the findings to the review board, their faces were pale under the fluorescent light. "You're suggesting intention," one of them said. "Design." I nodded. My throat was dry. Another scientist, Dr. Halverson, leaned forward and whispered, "If this is real, someone built it to find us." For a while, we all sat there in silence, staring at the orbit lines glowing on the projection. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but the thought pressed down like the weight of gravity itself, the feeling of being seen. Weeks passed. Triatlas drew closer, no longer just a faint echo in deep space. Observatories across the world aligned their lenses. Chile, Australia, Japan, Hawaii. Data streamed in from every hemisphere, all pointing to the same conclusion. It was approaching with precision no natural object could possess. Its descent into the inner solar system was not a fall. It was choreography, a controlled glide across the dark, as if obeying an ancient script written in motion. Then came the first whisper of confirmation. Radio observatories detected faint repeating bursts at 1.4242 gigahertz, the hydrogen line, the universal frequency used for deep space communication. It pulsed in binary intervals, 1, pause, 0, 1, pause, 0. The simplest form of mathematics, the oldest language of the stars. We isolated the signal, filtered the background noise, and stared at the rhythm that refused to stop. Could it be reflection? Someone asked. Echoes from our own transmissions? But the pattern didn't match anything we'd ever sent. It was original, intentional. That night, as we gathered around the main console, a new visitor joined our conference feed, Dr. Michio Kaku, his voice calm but edged with awe. He studied the waveform on his monitor for a long time before whispering, "It's waiting for an answer." The words hung in the air like prophecy. For days afterward, no one spoke above a whisper in the lab. It felt wrong, as if raising our voices might startle the cosmos itself. The signal continued, pulsing with mathematical patience. It was not noise, it was intent. We ran simulations, hundreds of them, each one revealing the same terrifying beauty. Triatlas was decelerating, not chaotically, not from collision or resistance, but with measured grace, anticipating the sun's pull and adjusting accordingly. Its braking curve was perfect. No spacecraft on Earth could replicate such precision. It wasn't falling, it was maneuvering. And then, one by one, the pieces began to fit. Every assumption we had about randomness collapsed under the weight of precision. The object had traveled across millions of light years without losing its path, avoiding stars, navigating gravitational currents, maintaining stability beyond comprehension. How? The answer came quietly, hidden in the numbers. Tiny bursts of acceleration, micro-thrusts repeated every few hours like a heart still beating after eons of silence. We thought it was a glitch. But when we cross-checked multiple telescopes, the pattern persisted. Triatlas was correcting itself. I stared at the data until my vision blurred, until the numbers became constellations. It was alive, not biologically, but mechanically. A machine carrying purpose across the void. We submitted our findings, wrapped in cautious terminology, hiding our dread behind phrases like non-natural perturbation and potential artificial propulsion signature. But everyone knew. The press would have called it science fiction. To us, it was faith and terror combined. And every night I stayed behind in the observatory long after the others left. I'd turn off the overhead lights and let the starfield projection cover the walls. In the dim glow, Triatlas was just a pixel, a ghost among billions. Yet that single point of light felt heavier than any planet, as if the entire cosmos was holding its breath. Sometimes I imagined I could feel it looking back. The news eventually leaked, as it always does. Whispers on encrypted channels, then sudden bursts on social media. Artificial object approaching solar system. NASA confirms anomaly, possible alien probe. By the time the networks caught up, the story had already become a wildfire. The world tilted overnight. Every conversation, every feed, every headline revolved around the same question: are we ready to be known? Governments issued statements denying everything. Scientists deflected questions. But Triatlas didn't care about politics. It kept moving, steady and patient, its silver silhouette drifting ever closer. On a night I'll never forget, the probe's trajectory brought it into visible range. Through the main telescope, it shimmered, a metallic reflection gliding through the sea of stars. I pressed my hand to the glass, as if distance could dissolve through wonder. The realization settled in my chest. This was not just contact, it was judgment. When the next sequence of binary pulses came through, our instruments nearly overloaded. The signal grew sharper, clearer, a pattern nested within another pattern, a dialogue written in physics. It was calling to us, or maybe calling for us. We were not listening to a rock, we were listening to a voice, and deep down, every one of us knew this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed felt like standing at the edge of creation, watching the universe blink for the first time. Triatlas was no longer a rumor, it was an event. Every observatory on Earth turned its gaze toward it. The global feed was a constant stream of light curves, telemetry, and speculation. But beneath the chaos, there was something quieter, an unspoken awe, the kind that humbles a species. Each new transmission carried new data. The pulses grew more complex, forming clusters of rhythm, like a heartbeat learning language. It wasn't just repeating, it was evolving. The first time we noticed it mirroring our own signals, I froze. The waveform on the screen showed faint echoes of old Earth transmissions, fragments of radio broadcasts, early satellite beacons, even snippets of forgotten TV shows. Triatlas wasn't only listening, it was replaying what it had heard. When the first modulation resolved into a structured pattern, the room fell silent. It wasn't random noise, it was symmetry. Binary intervals repeating in prime sequences, mirrored perfectly around the hydrogen frequency. The probe was responding. NASA called an emergency session. I remember walking into the conference hall, my mind fogged with disbelief. The walls were lined with glowing projections, trajectories, spectral data, and pulse diagrams. Dr. Michio Kaku stood at the podium, calm yet visibly shaken. His voice was low but clear. If Bracewell was right, then we're not observing coincidence. We are witnessing a response, delayed, deliberate, and precise. Something heard us, and now it's listening back. No one spoke after that. It was as if language itself had become too small for what we were facing. Outside, the world trembled with speculation. Governments tried to contain the story, but the truth had already bled through every screen, every broadcast. An artificial object, a probe, an intelligence. Words that once belonged to science fiction now burned through the headlines. But in the lab, something stranger began to happen. Every time Earth-based telescopes focused on Triatlas, its motion shifted slightly. It wasn't coincidence, it was acknowledgement, a subtle nod of awareness. The fifth time it happened, Dr. Halverson whispered what we were all afraid to say: it knows we're watching. The following days blurred together in sleepless obsession. Triatlas approached the inner solar system, decelerating with impossible grace. Its braking curve was flawless. A ballet performed in vacuum, guided by physics beyond our comprehension. Our probes could barely maintain orbit, yet this thing moved like it had written the laws it obeyed. The signal changed again. Narrowband bursts in Fibonacci intervals: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, nature's code, embedded in galaxies, hurricanes, and DNA. We watched the numbers scroll across the monitors, each pulse a breath of ancient design. Was it an invitation? A test? The United Nations called it the Triatlas event. Delegates gathered in emergency chambers beneath the blue emblem, faces pale and hollow. Outside, protests filled the streets. Some people prayed, others screamed. Across cultures and languages, the same question echoed: what does it want? Meanwhile, we kept listening. The pulses continued, patient, rhythmic, intelligent. When we analyzed the latest transmission, it displayed a pause every 12 counts. We didn't understand at first, until Dr. Lee murmured, "It's measuring us. It's timing our response." That was the night the debate began, the most important argument in human history. Should we answer? Half of the room said yes. They argued that silence was arrogance, the greatest insult in the universe. To reach across light years and hear nothing back would be cruelty. Dr. Kaku agreed, saying, "To ignore a greeting from the cosmos is to turn our backs on the very miracle of awareness." But the rest of us weren't so sure. "You don't tap the shoulder of a sleeping god," Dr. Heller said quietly, his voice trembling. "We have no idea what built this. What if they don't think the way we do?" I said nothing. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to respond, to send a single message of numbers, a handshake in mathematics. But another part of me understood that this might not be a greeting. It might be a mirror. It was reflecting us, our transmissions, our noise, our history. Maybe it wasn't asking who we were. Maybe it already knew. We ran new models, testing for hidden data. The signal structure was far too deliberate to be chance. Each interval matched the windows of our observation cycles. When we looked, it responded. When we stopped, it went silent. The timing was too exact. It wasn't broadcasting blindly into the dark. It was aware of our gaze. The psychological impact was immediate. No one could sleep. The observatory became a church of quiet dread. Even those who mocked belief began whispering prayers before each new transmission. And then, one night, Triatlas stopped transmitting entirely. For 8 hours, the sky was silent. We thought we had lost it, that perhaps the probe had died or moved out of range. But just before dawn, our instruments lit up with a new signal, this time not from Triatlas itself, but from behind it. At first, we dismissed it as interference, a reflection from solar radiation. But the second signal was too perfect, too structured. It mirrored Triatlas's own pattern, only inverted, like a shadow speaking in reverse. Dr. Lee's voice cracked when he whispered, "There are two of them." Every monitor flickered with dual frequencies weaving together like twin threads of consciousness. They weren't broadcasting to us anymore. They were communicating with each other. For the first time since this began, I felt small, not as a scientist, not as a human being, but as an observer who had stumbled upon something older than language. It hit me then. We were not witnessing first contact. We were witnessing a reunion. The frequencies intertwined, binary harmonies weaving across the hydrogen spectrum. Each pulse, each silence, each shift in amplitude was deliberate. A conversation between ancient minds conducted through light and time. No one spoke, no one breathed. When the sequence ended, the room was filled with an almost sacred quiet. We stood there, surrounded by the hum of machines, realizing we had just overheard a dialogue meant for no human ear. That was the night I finally understood. We weren't being called. We were being measured. In the days that followed, the world stopped pretending to understand. Stock markets froze. Flights halted mid-route. Broadcasts played on silent loops of the same image, a faint shimmer between the earth and the sun. Triatlas hung there, suspended in perfect equilibrium at L1, unmoving yet alive, as if the universe itself had drawn a breath and was holding it. Every signal ceased. Every whisper vanished. It was watching. The silence was unbearable. We had built our world on noise, on constant transmission, on the hum of connection. But now that something larger had answered, we were paralyzed by our own reflection. Governments demanded control, scientists begged for more time, and the rest of humanity just looked up, waiting for meaning. Then one morning, our instruments caught the faintest flicker. Triatlas brightened, not with fire, but with precision. A shimmer of light bending like a thought taking form. Across its surface, sequences of illumination rippled, ordered, deliberate. The patterns weren't random. They were language, not spoken, not written, but visual mathematics. Images formed in cascading bursts, spiral arms of galaxies, the filaments of cosmic structure, star clusters bound by gravity and time. And there, in the center of it all, was a single glowing line connecting two points of light. One unmistakably our sun, the other far beyond any telescope's reach, a bridge between worlds. We watched breathless as the data resolved into a map of the Milky Way, but overlaid with something older, a structure, a path through gravitational currents. Every pulse, every symbol corresponded to natural constants, the geometry of creation itself. This was not communication, this was instruction. Then came the sequence that ended all debate. Prime numbers, glowing and vanishing in perfect rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. A declaration of intelligence. But hidden within the light, within the rhythm itself, we found another layer. Every 12 pulses, a pause, a delay. It was measuring our response time, timing our comprehension. We weren't just witnesses, we were subjects in an experiment. Dr. Kaku's words echoed through the darkened room. It's watching to see what kind of species we are. No one dared to respond. No message was sent. We didn't know what to say, and perhaps silence was the only truth we had left. The lights continued for hours, each pulse reflecting off the thin curve of our atmosphere like a second sunrise. People all over the world stepped out of their homes, drawn by the glow that painted the sky in ghostly silver. It was beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. And then, without warning, it stopped. For 2 minutes, the object held its position, utterly still, like a thought suspended between two worlds. Then its brightness intensified, scattering light across the planet, turning night into a pale imitation of dawn. Cameras captured it from every continent. The shimmer, the flare, and then nothing. The light collapsed inward and vanished. Every system went quiet. Our sensors flatlined. The data stream ended mid-transmission. There was no explosion, no debris, no trace. Triatlas was gone. Official statements followed within hours. sterile, cautious, bureaucratic. An unknown celestial phenomenon, they called it, no immediate threat. But the scientists who'd seen the raw data knew better. We had not watched a disappearance. We had witnessed a verdict. Days later, subtle fluctuations were detected in the ionosphere, disturbances in the electromagnetic field that defied every model. They appeared like fingerprints, faint and rhythmic, as though something had brushed against our atmosphere and left a trace. No one could explain it. Some said it was residual energy. Others said it was a message too vast for us to read. The debates burned out over time, as they always do. Humanity returned to its distractions, to the small quarrels of nations and noise. But something had shifted quietly, irrevocably. Scientists collaborated across borders. Old rivalries softened. People looked at the night sky differently, not as conquerors, but as children. Sometimes I wonder if that was its purpose all along. Not invasion, not observation, but revelation. To force us to look at ourselves, to hold up a mirror in the silence of space and make us ask the only question that mattered: are we worth knowing? Years have passed since the light vanished. Telescopes still scan the dark, searching for a whisper that may never return. Sometimes when solar winds graze the planet, the air hums faintly, and I imagine I can hear it, the distant pulse of something ancient and patient still out there, waiting. We never sent a reply. Maybe that was the reply, because in the end, Triatlas didn't need our words. It only needed to see how we looked back. And perhaps that was the entire purpose of its journey. Not to speak, not to test, but to remind us that the universe was never silent. It has always been listening. Now, when I stand beneath the stars, I can almost feel its gaze again, quiet and vast, somewhere beyond the reach of light. The thought no longer terrifies me, it humbles me. Maybe one day when we are ready, when we have learned to listen without fear, it will return. Until then, the silence is ours to keep, a gift or a warning. And when the universe speaks again, the question will not be whether we can hear it, it will be whether we deserve to.